My friend and I decided to spend the weekend at a quiet countryside house to get away from the city. The night was calm until around midnight, we suddenly heard someone aggressively trying to open the front door. The noise kept getting louder, and we huddled in a corner, completely terrified. We had no idea what to do. It felt like a real-life nightmare. Without a doubt, it was the scariest moment of my life. The crunch of gravel outside the window was too clear to be my imagination. I lay curled in the recliner, wrapped tightly in a fleece blanket, barely breathing. The motion sensor light outside had flooded the living room, exposing everything. Ellie froze on the couch, completely still. We didn't talk about what to do. We just slid to the floor in silence, like we were in a horror movie. I was 21. I had just moved out of my relative's house into my own one-bedroom apartment and felt like an adult for the first time. When Ellie, a friend from church, asked if I'd spend the weekend with her at a remote house she was watching, I thought it'd be fun. The house belonged to family friends who had gone out of town. Ellie had to feed their animals: horses, a donkey, rabbits, cats. No dogs, they had taken those with them. The house was out in the middle of nowhere, just beyond county lines, about an hour from Stockton. No neighbors, just cornfields, grass, and a silence so deep it had weight. We arrived that evening in her beat-up car, fed the animals, and then settled in the living room. She said she hated sleeping in other people's beds and offered me the couch, while she took one of the recliners. We watched a movie, shared gossip. It was almost cozy, but everything changed when the security light came on. First, we heard footsteps crunch across the gravel. Then it became clear. Someone had stopped outside the window watching us. I slid off the recliner and pressed myself against the floor, heart pounding in my throat. Ellie looked scared but tried to stay calm. We lay in the dark, tucked between the furniture. Then, bang! The alarm shrieked so loud it drowned out my thoughts. The panel flashed. Patio 2, open. Ellie started crying and hit the emergency call button. Nothing. No response. Panic crept in like freezing water. "Where are the phones?" I whispered. "One in the kitchen, one in the back bedroom," she said. The kitchen was closer, but right by the patio. The bedroom was farther, but safer. We didn't have a choice. We stood up and moved down the dark hallway in slow motion. The house felt bigger and emptier than it had in daylight. Every step echoed. Someone could still be standing outside, just behind the glass. We found the light switch near the bedroom door and flipped it on. I expected a regular lived-in room. Cozy, maybe a bit messy. But it felt sterile. The bed was perfectly made, the nightstand empty. It looked like no one had slept there in weeks. Ellie whispered, "The phone should be here." We started searching in a panic. I looked under the bed, opened drawers, and then noticed the cordless phone base was there, but the handset was gone. A sick, crawling fear started under my skin. The alarm was still blaring. Outside, not a single sound. Ellie spotted a golf club standing upright near the bed and grabbed it, holding it close to her chest. Useless, probably, but it felt better than nothing. I stepped back into the hallway and met her eyes. "We need the kitchen," I said. Neither of us had a cell phone. Mine was at home, and Ellie didn't even own one yet. We moved room by room, turning on lights, shutting doors behind us. I tried not to look toward the living room, but the thought kept hammering in my head. Those windows are uncovered, and anyone out there can see everything inside. The patio door in the kitchen looked solid, but I checked it anyway. Locked. I had to find a landline. Finally, we spotted it. An old wall-mounted phone with a curly cord. Ellie's hands shook as she dialed 911. I stood beside her, clutching a dull kitchen knife I'd pulled from a drawer. The voice on the other end sounded annoyed. The woman asked for an address. Ellie said, "I don't know. It's my friend's house. I'm just watching it." I nearly shouted, "Ask if they can trace the call." But the dispatcher had already tuned her out. She hung up. Just like that. We stood in stunned silence, the phone dangling by its cord. And outside, someone whistled again. Long, like they were calling for us. We stood there, gripping the kitchen counter like it could protect us. Ellie started to sob quietly, but no tears came. Just the kind of choked fear that makes your body go numb. I knew no one just whistles in the middle of the night, out in a field for no reason. Not here. Not now. I had to do something or I was going to lose it. I yanked the phone from the wall and dialed 411. Directory assistance. The woman who answered sounded calm, like I'd asked for a pizza place and said she'd find the number for the local police station. I nodded at Ellie and tried to breathe steadily. Then, a loud metallic crash by the kitchen window. Like something heavy had hit the concrete. We both flinched. Ellie covered her mouth with her hands. I crouched near the fridge, my body shaking. The 411 operator stayed on the line. She said she'd connect us directly to the police and would remain on the call. A police officer picked up and started asking questions. Where we were, what we'd heard, if anyone else was in the house. We told him everything. And then it happened again. A whistle, and the lights around the house clicked on. Panic wasn't just creeping in anymore. It swallowed us whole. We didn't know where that person was exactly, but they were close. The officer said, "Stay on the line. We're on our way." I could feel the pressure ease just a little. We just had to wait. I looked at Ellie. She was shaking, but not crying anymore. We stood closer to the table, like being in the middle of the house might somehow make us safer. We knew the back door wasn't locked. We knew someone had been right outside that thin glass. And all we could do now was hope the patrol got there before he decided to come back. We heard them before we saw them. The sound of tires crunching gravel, spotlights sweeping through the darkness. And my heart nearly jumped out of my chest. I rushed to the door and saw a police pickup truck. The headlights were scanning the pasture on both sides of the driveway. 2 officers walked alongside the vehicle, shotguns in hand, matching its pace. It felt surreal. I just stood there, gripping the doorknob, unable to believe someone was actually here to save us. One of them stepped closer and said, "State your names." I answered, my voice trembling. He nodded, walked over to the phone, told dispatch they'd arrived, and hung up. We backed into the dining room like they told us. Then they began sweeping the house. One by one, they came back. The last officer had been outside, checking the barn. He entered through the kitchen patio door, removed his hat, and said, "The horse almost kicked me. Looks like she's spooked, too." He asked what other animals were around, and Ellie told him about the rabbits, donkey, and cats. He sighed. The door to the daycare area was definitely open. Someone tried to jam a mop handle into the sliding track, probably to block it, but it slipped out. I looked at that same door and for the first time felt truly cold. They hadn't found anything. No footprints, no people. Just the open door. They offered to stay longer and keep searching or to take us with them. We didn't hesitate. I started the car while Ellie grabbed our things, and 20 minutes later we were at her mom's house. We just needed to sleep. Our brains were fried. We lay in the same room, not saying a word. The next morning, the phone rang. Ellie's voice cracked. "We're going to feed the animals, but something's not right." She went with her sisters, and when she stepped inside the house, she saw muddy boot prints in the carpeted hallway. She called me from the driveway, barely holding back tears. She said the house felt like someone was still inside, but that wasn't even the scariest part. While her sisters were feeding the animals, Ellie went into the playroom, the one down the hallway behind the kitchen, the part of the house we hadn't even entered that first night. Everything looked almost the same. Almost. All 10 rabbits were in their cages, but each one had their paws tied together, with the same kind of string, neatly but tight. She said she froze for a moment. The whole scene felt surreal. Someone hadn't just broken in. They'd spent time there, calmly, methodically. She found a note resting on one of the cages, a torn piece of a pizza coupon wrapper with one word scratched into it. "Lucky." Ellie recognized it immediately. It had been on the fridge. Now it was gone. They spent nearly an hour untying the rabbits. None were hurt, but they were visibly shaken. One of them was trembling. She didn't stay a second longer. Called her mom, who arranged through the church for someone else to take over the house. Ellie said she didn't even want to know who had done it, or why. She just wanted to forget. I sat at my kitchen table, listening to her, and felt that same cold crawl down my spine. We never talked about that night again. Never went back. But every time I hear someone whistle, even casually, my heart skips a beat. A couple of months passed. Everything seemed to have calmed down, but deep inside, there was still a sense of something unfinished. Ellie changed her number and barely went out alone anymore. And I still woke up at night from knocks, even if it was just a branch tapping the window. It felt like the story was over, but my brain refused to let it go. One day, I stopped by a grocery store not far from home, the same one where I used to grab snacks before heading to that house. Everything was normal. People, carts, bright lights. And then my eyes locked onto a face. A man in the frozen foods section. Not old, not young. Just average. But he was holding a crumpled pizza coupon. The exact kind that used to hang on the fridge. He was talking to someone and laughed. And then he whistled. That same whistle. Not just a sound, but the way he did it. Like calling a dog or a child. My mind lit up every alarm at once. I froze, unable to look away. He turned, met my gaze, and winked. Casually. Like we knew each other. Like there was something between us. I dropped my basket and walked out. I didn't need confirmation. I knew it was him, or someone like him. Maybe the one, maybe not. But my heart had already decided. Danger was close. I sat in the car and couldn't breathe. Not because he did something, but because he didn't. And that was enough. I didn't tell Ellie. I couldn't. She had finally started to sleep through the night, and I wasn't going to drag her back into it. But I started noticing things. Tiny, almost insignificant details that anyone else would have brushed off. A note slipped under my apartment door once. Blank, but folded, like it was meant to carry a message. A car parked across the street every evening at the same time. Same make, same color, never the same license plate. Once I heard whistling outside my window. Just once. And maybe it was a coincidence. But maybe it wasn't. I started locking everything twice. I taped paper over the peephole. I stopped going to the store after dark. Fear didn't hit like a wave anymore. It dripped. Slow. Constant. Wearing me down day by day. One morning, I walked out to my car and saw a single rabbit's foot charm tied to my mirror. Brand new. Bright white. I felt bile rise in my throat. I pulled it off and threw it in the trash, but I knew what it meant. Whoever it was, he hadn't forgotten. And he didn't want me to either. I started looking over my shoulder everywhere I went. Every alley, every parking lot, every face in a crowd. The worst part wasn't even the fear. It was the silence, the waiting. Knowing that somewhere out there, someone was enjoying this, that they wanted to be remembered. And I remembered. Every day. A year has passed. Ellie got married, changed her last name, moved to another city, and seems to have finally let go of that night. We don't talk much anymore, but I know she's doing well. Things are stable for me, too. New neighborhood, alarm system, 2 locks, motion sensors. Everything seems under control, but sometimes in the middle of the day I catch myself frozen because I feel like someone's watching. Or I hear that same familiar whistle in a crowd. My brain hits panic mode instantly. Recently, I got a dog. She's big, smart, and always sleeps by the door. I told myself it was just for safety. But the truth is, I can't be alone anymore. Sometimes I wonder if this whole thing was made up, that maybe my brain created it under stress. But then I remember the note. The tied rabbit paws. The whistle. The coupon. It's all too specific. Too real. No one imagines things like that. And still, I'm not sure what he really wanted. To scare us? To break in? Or was it something worse? The worst part is, I don't know if it's over. Maybe it ended. Or maybe it's just on pause. And every night when I check the locks, I can't help but wonder if I've simply been put on hold.